We turn now to the U.S. southern border with Mexico, where the number of border apprehensions ticked up last month, about 16,000 more apprehensions from January. Our immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez spoke with the chief of Border Patrol, Jason Owens, who says the agency is on track to record over 2 million migrant apprehensions this year, and that most crossings are being aided by a criminal network of smugglers.
Are the smugglers setting the rules of engagement here?
Yes, they absolutely are. They dictate what the flow is going to look like, and we respond to it. Now, we try and get out in front of it and deny them the ability to use these areas, especially ones that we think are going to be dangerous for us and for the migrants. But at the end of the day, there's over 1,900 miles of border with Mexico. Now, when you talk about 20,000 Border Patrol agents, that sounds like a lot. But when you multiply that by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, across the entirety of the year, that number starts to dwindle very fast. And that's exactly what they'll do. The tactic is they'll push groups across knowing that we're going to respond from a humanitarian perspective and make sure that they're safe. And while we're tied up and occupied doing this, what are they doing a couple miles down the road?
Are you concerned about that, about the potential dangerous people or potential terrorists who may be infiltrating the country because you are so focused on processing asylum seekers, families, and others who are in distress?
Absolutely. You ask any law enforcement officer, especially somebody that works in border security, that is what keeps us up at night. We're at closing in on 1 million entries this fiscal year alone. That number is a large number, but what's keeping me up at night is the 140,000 known gotaways.
That is not part of that tally.
That is not part of that tally, and that's just what we know.
Is that a national security risk?
That is a national security threat. Border security is a big piece of national security, and if we don't know who is coming into our country and we don't know what their intent is, that is a threat, and they're exploiting a vulnerability that's on our border right now.
You mentioned that there has been a dramatic shift in the demographics along the border. We met migrants from Peru, Ecuador, Nepal, Burkina Faso, Mauritania. How are people from Nepal and Africa coming here?
So far this fiscal year alone, we've had people from 160 countries or more come across our border illegally. This is a global issue. We have people literally from all points across the globe making that same journey, and they're using smuggling routes. Every country and every region has smugglers that try and facilitate a pipeline for them to get to where they're going, and they're connected with one another. So they may, if they're coming from Europe or they're coming from Asia, they'll find ways to get to maybe South America, and then from South America they may make their way up through the Darien Gap and make their way up through Central America, and ultimately find their way to decision points that take them to different points along our borders depending on what smuggling organization that they're using. But it doesn't matter where they're coming from.
Former President Trump has said that we have millions and millions of people coming from jails and prisons. Is that accurate? Millions and millions?
I don't know. I don't know what the. I don't know if there other countries are releasing people from jails and those folks that got released are making their way up or not. I don't know what the numbers would be. It's the unknown that scares us.
By and large, though, are the vast majority of these folks good people, if you will?
Yes, I think they absolutely are by and large good people. I wish they would choose the right way to come into our country and not start off on the wrong foot by breaking our laws. There are still people that we're finding in those groups, though, that have criminal backgrounds, that have been convicted sexual predators, that have been convicted gang members. A very small amount in that population, but they're still there. Most of the folks that we're encountering that are turning themselves in, they're coming across because they're either fleeing terrible conditions or they're economic migrants looking for a better way of life. Doesn't make them bad people. It's just that they're not being respectful of the laws that we've established as a country, and they're actually putting the people in this country in harm's way because they're pulling the border security apparatus off of task.
And we're joined now by CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Great interview, Camilo. It is pretty shocking to hear an official of his level say essentially that the cartels are in charge of the U.S. border. What are the risks that he's referring to here?
Well, Margaret, we should point out that at a very basic level, the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border is mainly a humanitarian crisis fueled by record numbers of desperate people who are fleeing desperate circumstances. But what the Border Patrol chief is telling us is that it also has national security implications because he's mainly concerned about the so-called gotaways. These are migrants who are actively trying to evade law enforcement and who are captured on cameras or sensors but are not apprehended for different reasons. And so far this fiscal year, since October, 140,000 people have essentially snuck into the country without being apprehended by Border Patrol along the U.S.-Mexico border. Border Patrol Chief Owens is concerned about their intentions, whether they're criminals, whether they're national security threats. And so that is a national security threat that he is outlining. I do have to underscore, too, that statistics that are available on this do show that most of the migrants encountered by Border Patrol agents are not serious criminals. But again, as you know, it only takes one bad case for this to become a serious challenge for law enforcement.
And this is one of the most nuanced and complicated issues, and you were touching on that. But I know you spent a lot of time recently in Texas and Arizona. How prepared are the border communities for the uptick that's expected to happen in the next months?
That's right. Well, Margaret, we traveled to the Tucson sector in Arizona, which is now actually the busiest Border Patrol region for migrant crossings. More migrants are crossing in California and Arizona than in Texas, a dramatic shift from last year. And the main shelter system there is telling us that they may have to reject migrants, including families with small children, from Border Patrol because they're running out of federal funds.
Even with this government funding that was just approved.
Which includes a reduction in funding to shelters and NGOs housing migrants. That was at the request of Republican lawmakers. And even that new funding may not get to these people in time. And so Border Patrol, Margaret, may have to release people into the streets of Tucson. The Border Patrol chief told us that that is a possibility. And so while Washington, Congress, and the White House continue to bicker over this, the communities at the border are bracing for another crisis.
And you're getting back to, it's Congress that controls the purse strings and provides the resources, and the president tries to set the policy. I want to ask you about a video that we're going to show to our viewers because it's been widely circulated, and I think it needs some context. What we are seeing here are National Guard forces in uniform trying to prevent migrants who are already on U.S. soil in Texas from being able to claim asylum. What do we need to know about this? Because it's getting very politicized.
Well, what we have been told is that a group of several hundred migrants, most of them Venezuelan men, broke through these barriers that the state of Texas has set up near stretches of the border, including in El Paso, to deter illegal crossings. One migrant was arrested for assaulting a National Guard soldier deployed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. We don't know what prompted this incident and the migrants to do this, but I do have to underscore that the Texas National Guard is there in El Paso and other parts of the border to physically block migrants from being encountered by federal Border Patrol agents. Why? Because Border Patrol agents have a legal obligation to process these migrants if they are physically on American soil, and also to refer them to an asylum hearing if they request humanitarian protection. Texas is trying to actively block that. These migrants were already on U.S. soil because the international boundary there is actually in the middle of the Rio Grande, so they had to be processed under federal law.
And that's the subject for another conversation about that tension between state and federal officials. Camilo, thank you for bringing us that interview.